I would like to move House File 3542 with a recommendation that it be referred to the Children and Families Committee.
Yes. Okay. Representative Hudson moves his bill, and it is properly before the committee. Representative Hudson, please explain your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me begin with a apology and a ask for accommodation by Lead Pinto. There was work going on with this bill literally at the 11th hour, and by that I mean 11 o'clock last night. So I haven't had the opportunity to properly discuss with you what we're thinking in terms of how this bill should move forward to children and families. So we're going to have a nice open discussion about it right here today. So in current statute, there's a provision that allows the commissioners of Human Services and Children, Youth, and Families to disclose the existence of an investigation if they deem that it will not compromise a current investigation, and the current language says that they may do this. Our intention, in order to increase transparency to both the public and especially to the legislature, is to change that may to a must. My understanding is that Lead Pinto has an amendment that I look forward to considering, so we can get to that quickly.
Yes. So thank you. Briefly, is there anyone in the audience who wants to testify about the bill? Otherwise, we'll move to the amendment. All right. Lead Pinto, you have the A2. Would you like to explain your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it was partly, and I wonder if we could maybe have the department just provide comment on the bill. The concern is, oh, I was muted. Look at that. Okay, thanks. I'm hoping I'm not muted now. Accidentally. Oh, because my laptop. There we go. In any case, Madam Chair, wondering if we could have the agency comment on the bill. My concern with the way the bill was drafted is not the change from may to must. That's good. We want transparency, but we want to make sure that it wouldn't compromise the investigation, and the original bill crosses out that phrase. So I'm wondering if maybe we could get just input from that perspective.
Yes. Mr. Conley or Inspector Clark, would you care to join us? Since you're back at the table, please start by saying your name again. Thank you.
Chair Robbins, Lead Pinto, John Connolly, Deputy Commissioner and State Medicaid Director at the Minnesota Department of Human Services. I think the main concern that I just highlight, and then of course refer it to the Inspector General for more perspective, is if we are required in every instance to disclose a payment withhold, it in essence will tip off agencies that may be committing fraud or organizations that may be committing fraud before an investigation is matured enough. And we wouldn't want to disrupt those situations when law enforcement's investigating, and then a provider or an agency or organization would have kind of a warning that investigation was occurring, and therefore be able to falsify records, hide information, things of that nature, to prevent the investigation from basically reaching the conclusion that it's aiming to reach. So with that, maybe I'll stop and have Inspector General Clark supplement.
Inspector General Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. It's not a hypothetical. Disclosure does oftentimes lead to compromising investigations. This is currently happening in our state. It's currently happening with our investigations that we have. I know law enforcement, when I was at the Attorney General's office, it happens. Tipping off the subject allows them to destroy evidence, coordinate their stories, or flee the state or the country. We oftentimes see, unfortunately, unscrupulous providers, when they get wind that we're investigating them for fraud, they start to threaten or try to influence vulnerable adults, recipients in those programs, to try to get them to change their tune. We also see, unfortunately, bad actors try to falsify or tamper with documents. So I do have some serious concerns about a requirement that we need to disclose to people that are under investigation, that they're under investigation, that can have all sorts of unintended and bad consequences.
Thank you, and I think we all agree with that. Lead Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So given that, I prepared the A2 amendment, which would require disclosure within 30 days, just as the bill would, but would allow that disclosure to not happen if there's a determination that it would compromise the investigation. So it'd be the disclosure of investigation would have to happen within 30 days unless it would compromise the investigation. And so would offer that, and I think that achieves the goal of transparency, but also achieves the goal I know that we all share, which is to make sure that we get payments, fraudulent payments stopped and hold accountable the people who are doing it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on the A2? Would you like to comment, Representative Hudson?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you, Lead Pinto, for the amendment, and thank the agency staff for expressing their concerns. And as you stated, 100%, we absolutely share that concern. Very much appreciate the feedback from the agency, appreciate the concern from Lead Pinto, and I agree that we most certainly do not want to tip people off who are unaware of the fact that they're under investigation. However, the text of this particular amendment, to my mind, completely hollows out the intent of the underlying amendment, which is to compel disclosure in cases where it wouldn't result in tipping off somebody that they're under investigation. And so we do have a verbal amendment that's been prepared and that nonpartisan can read after we consider the A2. But my recommendation would be to pass on the A2 as drafted with the assurance, my assurance to Lead Pinto that the intention of what he's trying to accomplish here is something that we intend to bake into the cake as it moves forward to future committees.
Can I?
Thank you. Yes, Lead Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask Representative Hudson, I guess I'm unclear about how the A2 would work against the goal of your bill, in that it would require disclosure unless it would interfere with unless that disclosure would interfere with the investigation. So I guess I'm unclear. I'm not quite seeing the conflict there.
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Lead Pinto. Yeah, I suppose my premise was unstated as to what the negating fact would be. So what it does, this is about discretion, right? It's about the agency having discretion to determine whether or not disclosure would impede an investigation. What we want to clarify, the entire intent of the underlying bill is to remove that discretion so that we know that, and I think it'll become clear in the verbal amendment that we present, that the intention is to provide objective circumstances where the existence of an investigation must be disclosed so that it's black and white, open and shut, no discretion from the agency, but at the same time not compromising an investigation that the subject is unaware of.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
if I may.
Lead Pinto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I gather that you're thinking, Representative Hudson, that if payments are suspended or reduced or withheld, then the entity under investigation would know about that. I picked up from Mr. Connolly's testimony that might not actually be true, that somebody could have a payment be withheld and not know that that's the case. Maybe Mr. Connolly could just clarify that, because that's what I was hearing him say, which seems sort of odd to me and probably seems very odd to you, Representative Hudson, so I'd love to get that clarified.
Mr. Conley.
Chair Robbins, Lead Pinto, I'll refer that one to Inspector General Clark.
Inspector General.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Pinto. So yes, when the department takes action to reduce, suspend, or withhold payments, so we think about payment suspensions due to credible allegations of fraud, we're required under state law to give written notice to the provider. I believe it's within 5 days after we implement the payment suspension. So typically, right, that's how the process works. Once we suspend payments due to credible allegations of fraud, we notify the provider. So those same concerns about like the provider not knowing about the investigation are typically not in place when we take actions to reduce or suspend payments. What I will say is that there's some concerns. I've talked to the Attorney General's office. There is a provision in federal law. It's CFR 42 CFR 455.23, which allows law enforcement to require the state to delay that notification to the provider. And I think that can be like up to 90 days, right? So sometimes we refer stuff to a provider, we suspend payments. the AG's office, maybe the federal law enforcement says, we don't want you notifying the provider for 90 days. So there may be some conflict between some of this language in federal law in terms of law enforcement can intervene in this situation and tell us not to disclose information to a provider.
Thank you. Lead Pinto.
Thank you,
Then
Madam.
we do need to keep
Yeah,
moving.
no, understood, Madam Chair. Yeah, that's complicated. So I'm gathering from what the agency is saying is that in general, folks will know if the payment has been reduced, suspended, or withheld. There may be some circumstances where they might not. I'm just anticipating the verbal amendment to come. Representative Hudson sort of trying to step through this because it seems to me that ultimately, we want to make sure there's not interference investigation. Somebody has to decide that. I don't know that there's some automatic way to do it. I gather you have some concern about having the agency make that determination, and I understand that. I'll tell you that I was kind of brainstorming before putting together the A2, is there some other path? And happy to have a conversation with you. Is there somebody else that could have that discretion or some way that the IG's discretion could be reviewed in some way? So anyway, that's an ongoing conversation. I know there's a few more committee stops. I'll just note I'm gathering that my amendment may get voted down by the majority, and then you'll be offering the verbal amendment. I do have process concerns about the verbal amendment, just to sort of give a preview about that. I know the chair is going to be able to waive rules if she chooses to do so. I want to make sure that we're making some kind of progress here. I guess we'll just sort of let the steps play out. But to confirm, very happy with transparency and disclosure, and we absolutely want to make sure we're not interfering with investigations, and certainly interfering if there's some federal requirement, as the IG referenced. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lead Pinto. So with that, all those in favor, we're going to vote on the A2, and then we'll go to the oral amendment. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the A2 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Nay. The A2, it did not pass. Now, Representative Hudson, would you like to go to your oral amendment?
Yes, I would, and I would request that nonpartisan staff read what we have drafted up.
Good morning, Mr. Johnson. Please read the oral amendment.
Good morning, Chair, Representative Hudson, and members. The oral amendment would read as follows. It would be page 2, line 16, after request, insert, if the commissioner has taken action to reduce, suspend, or withhold payments to the subject of the investigation.
Thank you. To your oral amendment, Representative Hudson.
Yeah, so again, the idea here is that we're working on the presumption that if payments have been withheld or reduced, then the subject of the investigation is aware that something's going on. And so disclosure of that investigation should be appropriate under those circumstances.
Representative Greenman.
Thank you. Just a quick question, and it may be for you, Representative Hudson or Inspector General Clark, and as somebody who's not a prosecutor, but it feels like to this question of if you've taken an action to reduce, suspend, or withhold payments already, that you may, in some cases, have sort of already started the process that will alert someone. So I assume in law enforcement investigations, especially if you're building a bigger case, you may want to withhold disclosure before the actions are taking that potentially will notify the target of the investigation. So I'm wondering if, again, if this leaves, if the way that this is drafted and sort of focusing on the actions, which I understand the intent, but leaves an area where we may either be conflicting with federal law or inadvertently alerting people and sort of getting in the way of the investigation. And that might be a question for you, Inspector General Clark.
Inspector General Clark.
Thank you, Chair Robbins, Rep. Greenman. I'm having trouble following the language in the amendments. I don't have them in front of me. But yes, there can be reasons why law enforcement would not want to notify a subject about anything, right? Like there are concerns in investigations. I've seen it. Folks start deleting emails. They start destroying computers. They say, oh, my office was flooded. I no longer have any information. These are very serious concerns, right? So I think we just need to be careful and probably get law enforcement perspective on this too, whether it's the BCA, federal HHS, OIG, or the Attorney General's office about their concerns in terms of why they would want to delay notification for payment suspensions to providers.
Yes, Representative Greenman.
Thank you. Quick follow-up. That was going to be my next question is, Representative Hudson, have you gotten technical or otherwise feedback from the BCA, from the AG's office, from the U.S. Attorney's Office on this?
Representative Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Greenman. The answer to that is no.
Lead Pinto?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have some substantive concerns with the amendment. I'll note that the commissioner having taken action to reduce, suspend, or withhold payments is not the same as the commissioner having reduced, suspended, or withheld payments. So even just their taking action to do so, I'd be worried that the subject of the investigation would not have been tipped off. I'll also note the IG referenced there may be situations where somebody actually doesn't know that payments have been reduced, suspended, or withheld. And of course, there's the concern that was referenced about potentially there could be situations where put in violation of federal law regarding the program. Having said that, this at least this is better than the underlying bill. So on substance, I'd be inclined to support the change, recognizing there's a few more committee stops to go through. My bigger concern is just on process that the committee rules have a noon deadline the day before the committee. Minor oral amendments of a, quote, corrective or technical nature may be permitted at the chair's direction. I think that's like technical, cleaning up an error or something. I think that this doesn't fall in that. I think it'd be pretty hard to argue that it does. Madam Chair, you of course can waive committee rules. I would urge we want to do that very sparingly because it does seem to me, and honestly, Madam Chair, what I'd urge you to do is to hold off to allow this amendment to be offered in the ordinary course of a future hearing. I know there's several more committee stops, so you're probably very reluctant to do that. But I guess what I would ask at a future hearing, the minority may well want a rule waived, and we'll probably ask that happen and hope that can happen similarly to what's happening here. So as I say, I'm inclined to support the amendment substantively, but I do have concerns regarding the process of it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Lead Pinto, and I understand your concerns. We had a brief conversation before the hearing about that, and you and I spoke Friday about your concern in the A2, and this was our attempt to try to accommodate your concern, which we all share, that we don't want to tip off someone. We want transparency, and both goals are important. And so in that spirit that I told you about it, we provided copies. We're trying to work expeditiously because of all the committee stops and the short deadline, but we're also trying to work cooperatively. I am waiving the rule, and we are allowing the oral amendment, and I honestly hope you'll support it and that we can work together as it goes to other committees. So the idea, honestly, for the public to understand all the kind of back and forth is that we want to get to the point where we don't tip off fraudsters that an investigation is going, but once the people under investigation are aware of the investigation, who's under investigation should be reported to us as legislators or other people who make a request. It's not going to be like in some giant website or something. It's on request. But for those of us who in the legislature, I gave a list of 72 childcare providers a year ago to DHS, and no one would ever tell me if they had done any follow-up. We had the same thing with an ICS provider at our hearing in September, and we never were told if they were doing any follow-up. I still to this day do not know if payment has been suspended. So in the interest of working cooperatively with the legislature, we need to compel the department to tell us more of what they're doing once the people have been notified. So with that, there's a vote before the committee on Representative Hudson's oral amendment. Do we need to read it again? Okay, so all those in favor of adopting Representative Hudson's oral amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Thank you. The oral amendment is adopted. Now to the bill as amended. HF 3542 is, I renew Representative Hudson's motion to re-refer HF 3542 to the Committee on Children, Families, and...
Madam Chair.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Representative Elkins.
I had a question for staff, I think. So with reference to the Optum report, the section of the Data Practices Act that was referenced in all of the redactions wasn't the investigative section, it was the trade secrets section. So as a question for staff, but would the bill in its current form address redactions that were made pursuant to the Trade Secrets section of the Data Practices Act?
Such a great question. Mr. Johnson?
Madam Chair, Representative Elkins, the disclosure that is authorized under here is simply the existence of an investigation. It wouldn't go to the details. And I think in probably all of the cases that you're thinking of, it would require disclosure of the details. And so I would say that it would not address that particular question. It's basically just a yes or no, is there an investigation going on?
So.
Representative Elkins?
Yeah. So to the case at hand, the current Optum report, which has been heavily redacted, but under the Trade Secrets Act, would DHS be required to disclose that information? No.
Mr. Johnson?
Madam Chair, Representative Elkins, I'm going to say the answer is almost certainly no, unless somehow there's a trade secret connected to the existence of an investigation. I can't sit here, think of a fact scenario where that would be the case, but it would not change anything related to the limitations on the trade secret unless that dealt exclusively with the existence of an investigation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I renew Representative Hudson's motion to re-refer HF 3542 as amended to the Committee on Children, Families, Finance, and Policy. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The bill is on its way. Thank you, Representative Hudson.